Welcome to our Week 6 wrap-up here at the 16th season of Blood, Sweat, and Beers. What's the worst mistake you've made in fantasy football? Earlier this week, I somehow, using the app, dropped 2 players in order to pick up a defense. Now that defense ends up helping me through the week, is actually my highest scoring position. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but I in no way intended to drop the previous defense and a viable running back. Now, I have no idea how the app did it. I didn't even realize it until several days later when I realized I had a bench spot open. Couldn't figure out how that happened. Went back and looked. And props to Alex Billy for being on top of that, seeing that there was a decent running back out there and picking him up pretty much immediately after he was available. Cleared the 2-day waiver. So my loss, his gain. I don't know that it changed anything for this particular week, but definitely left a gap on my roster. And I'm already a little bit light on running backs. So that was not a great mistake for me. But other than maybe I should have started this guy over this guy, not mistakes like that, but trades. I know there have been some pretty significant bad trades in the past. What's the worst fantasy mistake you've made either in this league or in another? Speaking of mistakes, not really hot off the press anymore. It is a few hours old, but our first trade of the year, I won't fact check that, I believe, it is a shocking one on a number of different levels. Now, I won't get into the details of the different players involved because, frankly, I don't care. I always trust that as long as both parties agree, both teams agree to the trade, it's going to be relatively fair. Nobody tanks, especially at the end of the season. Nobody wants to come in last, so the particulars, kind of irrelevant. However, the teams involved and the significance of the players involved, it's hard not to wonder what's going on. I think it shook the league a little bit this morning when we all got that email that a trade had been accepted. When we read and saw, well, it was confusing. It was a head scratcher. Maybe it's unsettling for you. So I'm curious. Short little poll here. The trade between Poncho and Pet Detectives, is it A, 2 dedicated team owners working hard to improve their team's chances of making the playoffs? B, 2 stubborn and prideful team owners caught in a spiteful game of chicken? Or C, the cry for peace and security? I'm curious what you think. I'm leaning towards a combination of, well, B and C, to be honest. Okay, let's take a look back and review the scores. What could have been, should have been, might have been. Here, Kamish finally shows up in a big way. High score of the week, high score for him on the season, a whopping 174. And Booger Pickers, not a lot he could have done on that one. Just came up too many points short. Let's take a quick look at the potential high scores. So not too far off. Kamish comes in with an A above 90%, and Boogers comes in Midland B, which lets us know that even at his absolute best perfect roster, Boogers wouldn't have been able to compete. So sorry about that. What I like, though, not only was it Kamish's best score of the season and the high score of the week, really like the fact that the streaming defense option was the best score on that roster this past week. That was a nice little plug. Although, frankly, even if the defense had scored 0, that still would have been a win. But what I like about Booger's roster for this game, Dak Prescott scored negative points. Just feels right. Feels good. Okay. Let's look at Skibbity and Slappy. Appreciate you embracing the name Slappy. It makes everything a little bit easier on the rest of us. But Slappy's he's rolling. He's got 5-1 by himself in first place in the East. It's kind of a concerning thought. We all know what happens every draft, and yet somehow this is still where we are midway through just about every season. I don't fully understand it. But as we look at the potential scores, perfect score from Skibbity would have given him the win, although a couple better choices from Slappy, he would have been over there. But B's all around for their pop. Gloop and Jersey Birds. This was a fun one. So close. Came down to the end. No miracle for Jersey Birds. We look at their potential high scores, and we get our first, it's actually really our second as I went back and looked, but our first perfect score since I've been keeping track last week of the season. Gloop comes in, perfect 100%. That was his best lineup, which was kind of scary because he won by fewer than 2 points. And obviously Jersey Birds, a couple of extra adjustments, and well, he could have had that game. I like the 100%, very solid. That's all what we shoot for. And then I wonder, it's not really what I like about Jersey Birds, but if anybody remembers Ian's first year with us, it seemed like every time he had an opportunity to take the number one spot, he would lose. It seemed like he was shy of that stage, being on stage, right? He didn't want that the number one spot. He didn't want the attention. Maybe he didn't want the responsibility. Maybe he was afraid of the expectations of having that number one spot. Are we seeing a similar pattern here this year? Every time he gets close, I mean, I predicted him week 2. That was the overreaction. He was going to run with it. Did I make him scared just by saying that and cause this mini little spiral here, or will he right the ship? I guess we'll see. Reed option and Poncho. Reed continues to hold himself real close to the top spot there. Tied, loses the tie break. This was not an exciting game to watch. And if you look at the potential scores and the pop, well, Alex Billy was just about maxed out to win by 2.5 points. A change or two, and Poncho would have had that. He would have been a little bit out of the basement. At least he would have been standing on Joe's head, which I think would have been made him happy. That he would have been pleased with that. But what I like about this is that Reed option here, he ends up getting the win with 2 goose eggs. He's got 2 guys that did not score a single point or even a fraction of a point, and he still comes away with the victory. That's got to make him feel pretty good, knowing that that's unlikely to happen again. I also like that Poncho starts the Browns defense. I don't know why I like that. I just do. I feel like I hope he feels the compromise. I feel like that should eat away at his soul just a little bit. I don't know what the other options were. If that would have made any difference in the result of the game, who cares? He started the Browns defense. I think that's the big takeaway there. So anyway, final game, Pet Detectives and Puzzles. Puzzles is really slipping here lately. And as we look at the potential score and the pop, Joe was actually lowest percent of perfection and still had a pretty solid win. Still would have beaten the majority of the teams as you look over the schedule at 135 points, or over the scores. At 135 points, Joe ends up beating 6 teams. And you look at that potential, he could have blown it out. 190 points would have been his perfect roster. So unfortunately for Puzzles, still came in the 90s, above 90% to his perfect roster, and it wouldn't have even been close. Now, what I really like about this, not only that Joe gets his first win, we're happy for you for that, but also that Joe's bench outscores 3 starting lineups this week. His bench scores 121 points. All right, so Joe, maybe he's back. I don't know what's happening. But what I do think is funny is that Puzzles' perfect roster would still have been less than Joe's bench. Now, not that the bench matters. They don't count as points. But Joe's got some potential points on his roster there. And that was even pre-draft. Not draft. Pre-trade. So we'll see what happens there. Take a look at our rosters here first, or our standings here first. Kamish takes his rightful spot back in first place. That feels good, especially being the lowest scoring team. Not anymore. We'll look at the numbers there in just a second, but it's nice to see that we got two teams in the East over 80% likely to make the playoffs because the West, because the East has really been dominating. But it looks like we're turning the tables here just a little bit, but trying to do something about Mr. Snuffleupagus there, number 1 in the East. Let's not have that be a thing, okay? As we look at the stats for this week, where we are, again, Mr. Snuffleupagus gets, he's sitting in the number 1 spot overall, number 1 in the East. You've got your Kamish at the number 2 overall, number 1 in the West. And I appreciate that now your Kamish is no longer battling for the lowest point total scored for the year. Still second fewest. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you taking that spot. But just a few points, 4 points separate 7th, 8th, and 9th place in points scored. So really just sort of mucking about at the bottom, but scored points when necessary. It's nice to have not a lot of points scored, but not a lot of points scored against you. That certainly helps the season, helps the standing. All right, as we look ahead to week 7, Gloop has been on a mini streak here, scoring some points the last couple weeks. Can he slow down Mr. Snuffleupagus? Can he put a dent in his run? And which basement team will get their second win? Joe versus John. Will the trade have an effect? Will Derrick Henry go off and be Joe's demise? Will Travis Kelce show up and knock John down? We'll have to watch and see. Enjoy week 7.